Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? This is Enrique of Spanish United. Today we have a very special guest. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
My name is Andrii Tatarenko. I was born and raised in Dnipro, Ukraine. I currently live in Los Angeles, California. I am a musician. That's what I do. And people know me by the name of Andy Wolfson.
It's a pleasure, Andy. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Enrique. It's a pleasure to do this.
Likewise, I was invited to go to the Ukrainian Culture Center last Sunday into solidarity of the Ukrainian people, and it was my first time, meeting with Ukrainians. I didn't even know there was a large community out here. So one thing that Spanish United does is that we are a Hispanic organization that primarily helps Hispanics in terms of civil rights advocacy and also to help them with their basic needs. Many Hispanics have fallen through the cracks throughout the system, so many of them don't have access to many services or help. So we try to reach out directly to individual people that might need help, and that's what we do. We help out the community, and we also meet with other ethnic and racial groups, so that way we can promote harmony and to reduce tension and any type of stereotypes. So I think it's very important that different groups, reach out to each other, so that way they could know each other, so that way they can have a better relations with each other. So the Hispanic community, I want to say, is in solidarity with Ukraine, with Ukrainian people, and we share similar things because throughout history, Latin America has experienced invasion by the United States and through its policies. So we understand very clearly what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. So tell me a little bit about yourself and about the situation with going on with Ukraine, so that way the people in Spanish United could learn a little bit more about Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian people.
Sure. That's first thing I want to say is I think the things that you do and Spanish United does as an organization is really important, and I really relate to the ideas and to the steps you take. I especially appreciate you mentioning that you guys reach out to actual individuals rather than doing some kind of general work, because a lot of times I've noticed certain organizations, they seem active, but you in person don't really know anybody because those organizations could help. And it comes from smaller scale, like regional, to like bigger scale, like, United Nations, for example. So I think that's really important what you guys do, and your approach is awesome. I was born in Ukraine in 1997, which was 6 years after Ukraine got independence from USSR. And a lot of people think by mistake that Ukraine was willingly joining USSR back in a day in 1917. But unfortunately, that is untrue. And the way that Ukraine was joined to USSR, it was an occupation. In 1917, the Red Army intervened Ukraine and started bombing peaceful cities, killing civilians, and just taking over and occupying land, pretty much things that they're attempting to do now. And, in the words of Mark Twain, history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. Because right now, we are all Ukraine and our whole nation and people of all the ethnicities and backgrounds who live there, because it's home for many other people, not just Ukrainians. There are a lot of Russians lives there, and they never been oppressed. My big part of my family is Russian speaking, and there are a lot of Russian speaking on east of Ukraine. And unlikely to Putin's narrative and Russia's propaganda narrative, there was never an oppression of Russian speaking people or ethnic Russians in Ukraine. That's first thing I want to say. And growing up speaking Russian and Ukrainian both, I never had a problems. And all my friends and family pretty much never had a problems either. And there is a common common mistake to think that like, oh, people in Western Ukraine are kind of hostile towards Russian-speaking people because, you know, Eastern Ukraine closer to Russia, and historically had more influence from Russia just because of the territory, because of the location, because of the line of the border, you know, and Western Ukraine always had more leaning towards West, towards Europe, you know, towards democratic ideas. But
Right.
if we start talking about democracy, you know, actually first democracy was a Kozatska Sich, which was a Cossack organization and proto-country of Ukraine in modern city of Zaporizhia, which is on east of Ukraine as well, and which is about 50 kilometers from Dnipro, city where I was from. And Cossacks were pretty much, it means free men. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, back to like, you know, pretty much Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, was started in 7th century. So we have a long history that has been going way, way back. And it's full of wars and battles and, you know, establishment of a nation and a country. There were a lot of Germanic tribes have like going through the country and, you know, settling in. The war, like Romans coming over, all kinds of people. But Ukrainian nation takes its origin way back. First mentions would be, as I said, 7th century, with 3 brothers, Ki, Shek, and Horiv, and their sister Libid. They are father founders of Kiev, our capital and the cradle of our nation and civilization, pretty much for us, you know, for Ukrainians. And they're descendants of these people, pretty much modern Ukrainians, come from a strong nomadic warriors, you know.
So I wanted to ask, living here in the United States, how would you describe your interaction with Hispanic people? What do you know about Hispanic culture, and do you see similarities between Hispanics and Ukrainians in some way?
Oh, my friend, we are like a family, and I mean, to me, all people are family. We're all, you know, human race, but there are certain customs and certain features of each nation, right, and ethnicity that just there, and it's not a negative thing, it's a beautiful thing. And it so it makes me feel very warm and very happy to see how Hispanic people and Ukrainian people are alike, how much common we have in person, you know, our passion, the way Hispanic people very passionate and expressive and all, like they just fume with passion, the hot-blooded, you know, famous all over the world how Hispanic people are so passionate. And same with Ukrainian, we're very hot-blooded, very passionate people, we're very family orientated, you know. For example, like I've seen Mexican uncle's birthday party, like a tio's birthday party,
Right.
and it literally brought me back to like my uncle's birthday party back in Ukraine. You know, we party for not just one day and one night, we party for days. It's like 2-3 days minimum, a lot of dancing, a lot of drinking, a lot of passionate exchange of the feelings and ideas and thoughts, pretty much, you know. At the like your tio's birthday, you can see laughs, cries, you know, jokes, maybe it's fights sometimes, but it's all end up with a very like love-bringing feel, a very communion feeling of just being a one part of something bigger as your family, your nation, your ethnicity. And same with Ukrainians. And you know, ever since I moved to Los Angeles in 2015, I've been noticing how much we're alike and how much we can relate. I have lots of friends from Hispanic backgrounds. You know, some of them were born in the United States, some of them were born in, you know, Mexico or El Salvador or Puerto Rico,
Cuba.
or all Cuba as well. Definitely have some lots of love for my Cubans. I mean, we really, you know, most of my friends who are of Hispanic ancestry, our friendship started very fast and easy. You know, usually, like, I noticed when I moved here, I was just 18 years old and I was very naive, like, you know, just a young kid. I came here for music, and it was my dream ever since I found LA scene for me, and it could be the Doors, you know, and the Doors with their psychedelic and flamenco style would definitely bring me to some Hispanic musicians, from Carlos Santana to, you know, to Los Lobos, or to even Gypsy Kings from Spain.
Juan Luis
And
Guerra.
excuse me?
Juan Luis Guerra. He's another singer. He's Dominican. He's known as the king of bachata.
What's his name again?
Juan Luis Guerra. He's Dominican. He's from Dominican Republic. He's known as
Dominican.
yeah, he's known as the father of bachata. Bachata is a style of music from Dominican Republic.
Yeah, I know bachata. I love some bachata, but I don't think I know the father of bachata, and I'm pleased to be educated by you. I would like you to share some links for his music because I love
Yeah, sure.
bachata. I like some Romeo Santos sometimes, you know.
Yes, he's Dominican. And Prince Royce.
Exactly. Some Aventura, which is his band. So it's all like I'm mixed of bloods. I'm Ukrainian, Jewish, Gypsy, and German, and I found I tapped into my bloodlines with the help of the music. When I would hear Gypsy music, I would be like, "Oh my God, it does something to me more than to other people, you know, more than to other friends of mine who don't have like Gypsy blood in them." And same with Jewish. You know, when I would listen to klezmer, which is Jewish traditional music, I would be like, "Oh my God, this is literally makes my blood boil. It puts me into dance. It makes me feel very comfortable and happy, and makes me feel related." And same with Hispanic music, whether it be rancheros, whether it be mariachi music, you know, whether it would be bachata or like cumbia, you know, and you can see the connection between Ukrainians and Hispanic people in music as well. You know, it would be rhythmic patterns, or it would be just the way of expression, or it would the themes that would be raised, you know. And I've been playing with a lot of Hispanic musicians. One of them would be Fredo Ortiz. He's an incredible Mexican-American drummer from Gardena, California. He was just 20 years old when Beastie Boys took him on tour, and he had been playing with them for 12 years before one of them died, unfortunately, and Beastie Boys had to break up, you know, because they couldn't continue. And after that, Fredo played with a bunch of firm musicians, you know, Tito and Tarantula, for example, or like it could be Jack White. And then later he joined to this band called Gogo Bordello. And Gogo Bordello is an example of international friendship and international family connections, because Gogo Bordello is a band started by Ukrainian gypsy immigrant from Kiev, but he started the band in New York. And the band had some lineup changes, but it basically consisted of Ukrainians, Ukrainian, Russian Jews and gypsies, Ecuadorian people, Mexican people, you know, they had drummer from Trinidad before. And while playing the music, you can see how much it is related, because Fredo, you know, with his Mexican feel, joins this Ukrainian gypsy punk band and fits right on the spot. And then I met him while he was playing with them, and we hit it off instantly, became friends, and have been friends ever since that. And I was honored to play some music with him. I was honored to perform with him as well, some of his original music, and as well as honored to have him on the recordings of my music. And he's one of my closest friends, and we have a beautiful chemistry and vibe amazingly. And I can feel the connection of cultures there, because we have beautiful understanding of each other, you know, musically, mentally, and just on humane level.
Right. Music is known as the universal language. Doesn't matter what language you speak or culture you are, music is a universal language. As they say, math is a universal language. So here comes to like
Exactly.
two questions, that I that I have for you for the audience. Number one, how big is the Hispanic community in Ukraine? And number two, how would you say our relations are with Ukrainian and Ukrainian Americans in Los Angeles or in the United States with Hispanic Americans? So let's start with the first question, which is how big is the Hispanic community in Ukraine, and what's the people's interaction with them from what you've seen and know?
Witness growing up there and witnessing lots of foreigners, and as a tourist or as a international exchange students, or maybe they would come here there to work for some companies. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any numbers according to the Hispanic community in Ukraine. I know we got them there, and it's not as big as it would be in countries around United States or countries around Spain and Europe, or maybe like United Kingdom. But we have some Mexican people there. We have some Spanish people from Spain. We have some Salvadorian people there. We got our beautiful Hispanic and Latinos there, and interaction is very positive because in general Ukrainian people are very interested towards foreigners, and as I said, since Ukrainians and Hispanics can really relate more than averagely, they're really getting along by partying and drinking and doing some dances and going out. And then I was googling before doing this with you. I was googling just out of interest, like Mexican Ukrainian relationships, Hispanic Ukrainian relationships, and I found a lot of articles online, just like Reddit questions about Mexican men being in love with Ukrainian women, and trying to get married, and trying to like research some customs to be able to respect the family properly. And that made my heart really warm. And then I found a lot of articles about Ukrainian women falling for Hispanic men and Ukrainian men falling for Hispanic women, because it's, we are different, but we're so alike, and we have this amazing balance of understanding and interest in something new together.
Mm.
And the passion that Ukrainian culture has and Hispanic culture has is really like accumulates amazing, strong, loving, creative, powerful force. Because even art, like Hispanic art and Ukrainian art, is really so mysteriously alike, because in Ukraine we have a traditional short called vyshyvanka. It's short with some folk ornament, which
Mhm.
is very symbolic. It could be like black on red, or red on black, or red on white. And I see Mexican people in particular, especially here in LA, having really similar shorts to ours. And that was always freaking me out. But the more I got to know the culture, the more sense it started to make.
I was kind of surprised that I was watching on the news when Russia did the invasion of Ukraine. There were people leaving. I know that there was a lot of immigrants that were there, but I was surprised there was a lot of Hispanic immigrants there, because usually when Hispanics immigrate, if they're going to immigrate to Europe, they usually go to Western Europe. Very few venture into Eastern Europe. And I was surprised that there was a community there, and that kind of really blew my mind, because you don't really hear anything from Ukraine. Ukraine kind of tends to be isolated from the world. It's like most people even know Ukraine existed until the invasion happened, like a week ago. So that kind of caught my uh,
2 weeks,
surprise. 2 weeks
more
ago.
more than 2 weeks ago, yes.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. So
And
yeah.
I'll tell you one thing, that Ukraine is not isolated and never been isolated. Ukrainian Mexican relationships were established really fast after independence from USSR, independence of Ukraine from USSR in 1991. Our second president, Leonid Kuchma, visited Mexico in 1997, the years that I was born. And, you know, they had some trade agreements, some international business contracts, you know, and we have visa-free status, I think, Ukraine and Mexico. You know, we don't need visa to travel
Yes,
there.
visa.
I
Yeah,
think
it's called visa-free program.
visa-free. Yeah, so we have a visa-free program. The problem that people have with like the mistakes that people think that it's isolated or not that famous is honestly pretty much in ignorance, because people who didn't know about Ukraine before the war started, you know, they just didn't research, or maybe they weren't careful enough, because even here in Los Angeles there is a pretty big community of Ukrainians, and in our diaspora there are a lot of Ukrainian Hispanic marriages.
Yeah, like I said, I
You
was not
know,
aware there was a huge Ukrainian community here, because I've lived in Los Angeles, you know, for like 11 years, and I never met any Ukrainians. I've met Russians, but I never met Ukrainians. So, you know, I was amazed that there was a huge community here. And
exactly. We have two churches here. We have Ukrainian Cultural Center. We have a Ukrainian village in East Hollywood. You
oh,
know,
really? I didn't know there was a Ukrainian village in East Hollywood.
it's pretty much kind of just one block, but
So, so what's so
it's
what so
still
what's it
there.
called? Little Kiev, or what's it called?
No, it's just called Ukrainian village.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like a block where they have like stores, shops, you know, restaurants, that type of thing.
Kind of, but Ukrainian shops and restaurants are spread through the entire post-USSR community, because you know a lot of people were like asking, oh, when I would say that I'm from Ukraine, right? A lot of people would be Americans and Hispanic Americans and all kinds of people here. Some of them would be like, oh, is it in Russia? And that was probably because of USSR background of Ukraine, and people from countries outside of USSR usually think that USSR is pretty much modern Russia. But
Right.
USSR had a bunch of republics
Yeah, 15
occupied by
countries, 15
Russia.
countries.
Exactly.
And
So
then when the USSR collapsed, Russia became the Russia Federation. All those other countries became independent, and then I believe they created like a organization called the Commonwealth of Independent States, but I don't think that's really functioning.
yeah, that was pretty much an attempt to keep all post-USSR republics under Russian influence, because considering the current events, I personally think that like USSR never really wanted to, you know, break down. USSR never really wanted to stop existing as a country. And I think just the way it happened, the, you know, protests in republics for independence, like in Ukraine and Belarus, for example, which is neighboring with Ukraine, which is like between Ukraine and Russia. And unfortunately, Belarus has been under dictatorship of Lukashenko, who's pretty much sold himself and his country and his people to Putin.
Right.
You know, because they are bringing Russian troops through Belarus, they are firing missiles from territory of Belarus to Ukraine, bombing peaceful cities, bombing apartment buildings. You know, so to me, it feels like that union was created just to kind of keep everything together until Russia regains the power to basically recreate USSR, because that's a big dream of Putin. He sees himself as the guy who brings USSR back.
Okay, and my second question is how would you describe the relationships or relations between Hispanics and Ukrainians in Los Angeles or the United States from your interactions? Like, what do you see?
Oh, I see amazing unity. I see amazing chemistry. I see a lot of love towards each other. As I said, there are a lot of, in our like diaspora, there are a lot of Ukrainian, Hispanic couples, a lot of marriages, a lot of children, beautiful children. You know, it could be Mexican Ukrainians or Salvadorian Ukrainians or Cuban Ukrainians or like anybody, you know, I'm pretty sure there are quite a plenty of mixes from all Hispanic countries and ethnicities between Ukrainians, because as I said, we really go along well.
Mm,
Our idea, like our appreciation of family, you know, Hispanics are really family orientated as far as I know.
mm.
And I think you're
So,
not gonna let me lie. And Ukrainians are a lot of like really family orientated, and we really appreciate the family gatherings, you know,
mm,
when all your cousins, all your uncles and aunts, you know, all your tias and tios and nanas getting together and be like getting around one big table and like basically, you know, like carne asada party is like
mm.
almost exactly like a party that we have in Ukraine just when family gets together. You know, we do some barbecue, we drink some beers, we play some music, we dance, you know, children are playing together.
Mm.
It's just a nice celebration of life and a
Okay,
nice
so
celebration of family.
okay, so you would say, from your experience, like you have not seen any type of racism or Hispanophobia of Ukrainians towards Hispanics, because I know that there are some like immigrants like from Eastern Europe that have never dealt with like foreigners when they come here. They tend to be prejudiced towards like Hispanics and Black people. So that's the concern
Oh,
that was about.
definitely. Unfortunately, definitely there are, you know, occasions like that. And if you let me dig a little bit further back on that, it all comes from USSR background as well. I mean, there are, you know, people do not born being racist. People do not born with prejudice. You know, it's all in education. And unfortunately, USSR propaganda was that everybody outside of USSR is an enemy and you can trust them and they're gonna fool you and they're gonna take advantage of you. And USSR was very racist state, and they had a lot of prejudice, especially even like, for example, let's say Armenia, right,
Mhm,
was a part of USSR,
mhm,
but still Russian people like I don't want to just put a blame on Russian people, but still in USSR, Armenians didn't really they weren't treated as equal, you know, because they are darker, the their language is much more different.
mhm.
So there is a lot of that going on. There was a lot of that going on in USSR, and unfortunately, definitely there is a part of people from Ukraine. There are people in Ukraine who are racist. There are people in Belarus who are racist. There are people in Russia who are racist. It's like everywhere, but it's it's an old old product of propaganda and brainwashing, and it's not just towards other races or ethnicities. Even like some there are like white Ukrainians and white Russians who wouldn't trust to white Americans or, you know, Germans or anybody else,
Mm.
because they have, you know, they still have that background, they still have that burden of USSR teaching you, brainwashing you that everybody is an enemy and you can only trust to your kind, and etc etc. But I think it's really old, and it just comes from propaganda, brainwashing, and lack of experience of interacting between these groups. Because
The reason why I
yeah,
asked is because from what I know of the USSR, the USSR wasn't perfect, but and again, I'm not endorsing communism, but communism doesn't really emphasize on race like fascism does. So,
exactly.
so people that I've spoken to from the former Soviet Union have said that even though it was not a perfect system, but you didn't really have that issue with racism. And again, I'm just going by individuals. But after the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia and all these countries became independent, nationalism took over, and
Mm-hmm.
it became like your culture and a person's race is what made people survive. So I've heard stories of people like from the Stan countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan that are Muslim, but they kind of look like Chinese people that have had trouble like in Russia and whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do because of the ultra nationalism that has taken over like Russia and the former Soviet Union. So maybe that could be part of it as well. I'm not sure, but this is what I've researched and what I've heard from individual peoples from the former Soviet Union.
I can't speak for all, of course, but the problem with USSR that the way they try not to present the idea that it was so good because everybody had the social support. It was very like the socialism was happening. People were getting apartments, people had jobs, people were getting healthcare. If it's only part of that is true, and the thing that it wasn't really surrounded by idea of a nation is kind of true, but only on a paper, only written. Because, for example, back to USSR and even to current Russia and some post-USSR republics, N-word considered to be normal. They think that that's the way you call Black people, because they like, hey, that's the way I was taught in USSR. Even like back when I just moved here and I had a part-time gig at moving company, and it's a lot of like immigrants work there from post-USSR republic. And I had lots of arguments and fights with my coworkers because of racism, because the way they used racial slurs. And I think some of them sincerely didn't mean it in a bad way.
Right.
Because I remember a conversation with one person from Georgia, which is beautiful country, beautiful people, amazing, so friendly, so welcoming. I love them, and they're amazing people. And racism is not like their thing really. But as I said, in any country, unfortunately, you probably can find like a racist person plus USSR background, that I mentioned before.
Right.
And I remember this particular conversation because the guy was using N-word, but he didn't use it in a hostile way. He just said it,
like casual,
just like casually. And I was like, hey, my man, do you understand what you're saying? And he was like, what? And I'm like, don't you know that that's not the way you refer to Black people or people of color? There are multiple ways to refer to them that are normal, and that's not one of them. And moreover, it's a very painful word. It's a very hostile, very angry. It's a horrible word. And he genuinely told me, he was like, hey, man, I'm not really like, I don't have any problem, and I'm not really trying not to offend anybody. That's just the way I was taught in USSR. We didn't have they didn't have like African American, for example, to like in their vocabulary. They didn't have people of color. They didn't have even like just to say Black. They didn't have it. They weren't using this kind of references towards people of color, and they just used N-words. So some of them really genuinely didn't understand how bad it is. And that particular person that I'm talking about right now, after we discussed it, he realized it, and he actually was grateful to me for talking to him. He was like, hey man, thank you so much. I actually really like reconsidered my attitude and my education, and now I understand how bad it is pretty much.
One thing about a lot of people, because there are two types of people that are prejudiced. You have people that are prejudiced out of malice, that they just don't care, and then you have people that are prejudiced out of ignorance, like what you were saying about your friends. But again, that's why it's very important for people to be educated about certain things, because maybe people may say and do things that maybe might not be offensive to one person, but could be offensive to the other. Like one thing that I do with my organization, Spanish United, is to educate people about to not to have the stereotypes of Hispanic people, because in the United States, Hispanics, they tend to be seen as lower class people that are either servants or workers. They don't really see Hispanics that could be educated, that could be doctors or engineers. But again, that's just the stereotype. A lot of it has to do because of the media, the way Hispanics are represented. So that kind of gives an impression of an entire people. So that's one thing that I do through Spanish United, is to educate people that there are Hispanics that may not have the best jobs, but there are Hispanics that are highly educated, that are professionals, that are doctors, that contribute to society. So that's one thing that we do, is that in addition to helping Hispanics with their basic needs, we also educate non-Hispanics about Hispanophobia, what it is, what can be done to combat it. At the same time, to educate people about, there are Hispanics that are educated, that are professional, that contribute to society, because the stigma that people have of Hispanics is that we don't give, all we do is take. So that's one thing that I'm trying to do, is to educate people that Hispanic people are not only hard workers, but we also contribute, we also do charity. So I think it's very important to establish a dialogue and engagement with other people, so that way people can get to know us and understand us, and not see us as bad people or people that just take advantage of the system. So I think it's very important to have these conversations. So I just want
Definitely.
I wanted to tell you, Andy, thank you so much for being on the show. My time went a little bit over, but I was able to get a lot of things from you and me from you. And as soon as I'm done, I will send you the link, and you could share it to all of your friends and family.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. And just one little thing, if you let me add it,
Yeah, sure.
on a topic that you were just talking about, how people see stereotypically the Hispanic people. Same with Ukrainians. We receive same kind of prejudice towards, oh, these people, they come, they just trying to take advantage of a system. They like lower class people because they do some labor jobs and blah blah blah, and they don't know about that many of representatives of Ukraine that made significant input towards science or culture or art or engineering, whatever. But I just want to mention that people who have this prejudice, they probably don't know what is labor job and what is the hustle and struggle of immigrant is. Because I think what's the most important is your human core. It's not about your education or the skill or the occupation that you do, like job wise or activity wise. It's what comes to the human core. What matters is not who you are, not where you're from, not what color of skin you are, not what kind of job you do. What matters is if you're a good person, or if you are not simply. And a lot of people who have labor jobs, who do construction, who do moving, as I used to do, who do like cleaning and all the all the like kind of immigrant jobs, right? Whether it would be Ukrainians, Russians, Hispanics, those people don't get enough credit because those people do extremely hard jobs and they require skill and they're very dangerous and they take a huge toll on their health. But those people do it for their families. Those people do it to provide their children with amazing education and a proper health care and the best conditions of the lives they can. And those people actually are a big part of America. A hard, blue collar, hard workers, honest people, people with a really humane values towards friendship, family, unity, and they just want to live a good life. They want to provide a good life for their kids, and that's why they're willing to sacrifice their well-being. That's why they're taking those jobs. That's why they're taking crazy risks of crossing borders and coming to United States and go through immigration. And they're a big part of America, and that's what an American dream is. You come here with nothing and you build your own kingdom for you and your family. And I think a lot of people who don't have experience of doing labor jobs and going through the struggle of immigration and basically building your life back from zero, they just don't have the understanding that you got to give more credit to people who are somehow considered to be lower class. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. All right, then. Thank you so much for that final thought, and we'll keep in touch. And have yourself a wonderful afternoon.
Definitely. Thank you so much. You too. And I hope. I'm sorry when I go on rants. I can keep talking, and there's a lot of information. I hope my answers were constructive. I hope you received everything you wanted to receive from this conversation. And we'll stay in touch, definitely. Let me know if there is anything I can do for you. And as I said, I'll get those books for you and we'll make it happen.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Andy. Have yourself a wonderful afternoon.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.